Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, An Introduction to Inquiry, Observations Lead to Questions. My name is Lindsay Glassner. I am the K-12 Outreach Coordinator for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I'm joined tonight by my friend and colleague, Kelly Schaefer, who's the K-12 Education Specialist. She'll be managing the chat window. And if by small chance I have any technical issues at all, then she'll be taking over the webinar. For tonight, we are going to be talking about the inquiry process, the science process, scientific method, student-led investigations, whatever form of buzzword you want to use. We're going to be focusing on how you can generate student observations that can lead to some really great scientific questions. And this is actually part of a two-part webinar series. The first part is tonight, where we're going to be talking about the observations and questions component, but next month will be our second part. We will be talking about how to take those questions and really develop comprehensive student-led investigations, and specifically around bird experiments. Now, with tonight, we're going to be doing several different things, but our main focus, and one of the things that we really see ourselves as leaders in at the Cornell Lab, is talking about citizen science and how citizen science can be a great means for kids to first develop their observational skills, but also to generate their own questions that can kick off experiments. So we're going to go through some of the basics of defining inquiry, defining citizen science, as well as giving you some case studies of how this has looked in, that has led to kids' own investigations. Now, with that said, I want to introduce you guys. For those who are new to the Zoom platform, I recommend exiting the full screen and opening the chat window. That window, the chat window is docked on the right-hand side, and you can still see the entire presentation. And in that chat window, if you want to select to all panelists and attendees, that will allow the conversation to occur not only between you and Kelly and I, but between all the participants we have here during our webinar. We do try and have discussions take place, and many of the ideas that you guys share, I will try and talk about or announce or what have you via voice when I'm presenting. However, it's also great if your fellow educators can read your comments as well in the chat window. Several educators have made connections or really bounced ideas off of each other in our past webinars. So we do try and make this as interactive as possible. So please, down in that right corner, make sure you send to all panelists and attendees. Now we're going to start off this webinar with a prompt. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat window, but as well as introducing yourself, I want you to share your thoughts to this question. If you had to justify using citizen science and inquiry in your educational setting, what would you need to know? Now, this could be something of what would you need to know to convince yourself to use citizen science and inquiry, or this could be what would you need to know to justify using these teaching strategies to your administrators, your district. What would you need to know, such as time constrictions, protocols, connections to educational standards, student practices that are being developed. What would be your, what information would you need to know so that you can use what we present in the webinar tonight? And I'll give you guys a few minutes to share this in the chat window. And I know several of you have already responded to this prompt at the very beginning of the webinar. So I'm going to go through some of these as you guys are writing it down. It's nice to see some familiar faces, or I should say names. Hi, Erin. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Ann. So, Erin, you're in Las Vegas. You'd be looking to justify citizen science to in its relation to relating to ELA college readiness standards. Sarah's in Calgary talking about how you would have to look at wanting to incorporate citizen science into the average zoo visit. So with that informal perspective, trying to work with a group in 30 minutes or less, time constriction is very difficult. And nearly impossible in some cases with inquiry, depending on what you do, but we can certainly talk about that with citizen science. Hi, Anne. Seeing how you can relate citizen science and inquiry with pre-K standards for Nevada. Leah talking about working with multiple age groups. Hi, Sherry. Yeah, sure. Everybody's muted, so you're fine. So Allison, looking to develop a summer science program in New York City. Judith, you're talking about how it relates specifically to state standards. Allison, again, looking for more of just a 5-week program in an urban setting. Yeah, the setting really makes a difference. Okay, and so bringing up a really good point, you'd want to know also before you can use this in your educational setting, what skills the students already have, so you know how to allocate that information. So that comes into some assessment of the kids prior to embarking on a citizen science or inquiry adventure. Tina, welcome. Okay, so looking not just about encouraging people to participate, but really providing them that incentive effect of how their data is actually being used and studied. I have probably a good resource that you'd want to see there around that with the eBird program. Kate, welcome from Phoenix. That's where I was born. Looking for easy ways to connect to standards and to get other teachers on board. Welcome, Sue. Welcome, Emily. Welcome, Jennifer. So looking for reach with kids, not just when they are doing educational programs with you, but outside of your educational programs, it's a passion that you want to develop as a person. Excellent. So there's a lot of great information here. And the reason why Kelly and I wanted to start off with this prompt was because our K-12 program is actually going to be developing a new website. And at the end of this webinar, I'll give you guys a sneak peek into what that new website is going to be. But we're looking right now to figure out, you as educators, people who are already motivated to learn around citizen science or inquiry, fostering student observations, a lot of the skills that we like to teach at our K-12 program, we want to know what you need to know and what you need to justify your teaching with, so that way we can provide the best resources on our new website. So with that said, for those of you who are not familiar with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we're based in Ithaca, New York. We are a membership-driven institution, but we are associated with Cornell University. So we're part of the big Ivy League, but at the same time, we are a nonprofit on our own. And our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science with a focus on birds. Now, we do have other programs at the lab, such as the Elephant Listening Project. We monitor right whale populations and bioacoustics. We have the largest multimedia library of natural sounds and videos and photographs. So we do a lot of stuff here at the Cornell Lab, but our main focus is around research, citizen science, education, all on birds. And what we do with our K-12 education program is take that research and knowledge that's happening at the lab and develop resources for you as educators that will build student science skills and inspire those young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. Again, my name is Lindsay Glassner. I'm the outreach coordinator here, and then Kelly Schaefer is our education specialist. Kelly will be monitoring the chat window, so please feel free if you have any questions at any point in time, put those in the chat window. Kelly will answer them for you, and if there are any questions that she can't answer or that should be saved for a larger group, we'll also have time at the end where we'll answer all those questions live as well. Oh, and the other thing Kelly will be doing in the chat window is sharing helpful links. All those links will be made available in the chat window, and we're also recording the presentation too. So either between Tuesday's presentation or tonight, we'll make a recording available on YouTube and have a list of all those links available in the YouTube description as well. So in this webinar, we are going to be focusing on identifying and defining what inquiry is and how it can help meet educational standards. We'll also talk about what citizen science is and go a quick overview of the citizen science projects here at the Lab of Ornithology. But then we're going to really take some time to focus on what this looks like in a classroom, highlighting one of our free curricula called Investigating Evidence, and some of the case studies that have come from investigating evidence that have sponsored youth observations and questions. So let's make sure we're all on the same starting point. What is inquiry? If you can, in the chat window, throw out a definition or keywords that you think of when you think of inquiry. Excellent. So we have some responses coming in already. Asking questions, learning based on discovery. I love that word discovery. That's wonderful, Shirley. Asking thought-provoking questions that can lead to greater discovery. Oh, that discovery word again. Student-generated questions based on observations that they make. A curiosity about the world around you. Ways for students to design and explore. Exploring ways to answer questions, asking questions that require an investigation and exploration to an answer, spontaneous in-the-moment desire to know. Yeah, this is wonderful. Inquiry, investigations, the science process, there's so many different words out there, buzzwords, but based off the responses that you're giving me, you're hitting on a lot of key points here. Asking, exploring, discovering, investigations, design. A lot of these keywords all fall into the process of inquiry and active learning to explore answers, finding solutions to problems, absolutely. So for us here at the Lab of Ornithology, when we think about inquiry, the first thing, at least for me, I instinctually do is, okay, what is inquiry? Let's type a definition into Google or find a definition in Google. And if you search inquiry, you know, some of those very big definitions will come up with is an act of asking for information or an official investigation, which based on what your responses are, yes, asking, investigating. However, it's still more complex than that. When I was growing up, I was taught the scientific method here on the right, the very linear process of first you ask a question, you do your background research, you construct an hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, analyze that data, and report your results. Very linear process. I've seen before as well this more feedback loop of ask, investigate, create, discuss, reflect. None of these are wrong, so to say, but they don't seem to encompass the whole concept of inquiry. And some of you guys were touching on a lot of these points that we were thinking of. So when we think of inquiry, it's asking and answering our own questions, but the own questions are the authenticity points. Some of you guys put in the chat window, spontaneous in the moment desire to know. That desire to know is led by the children. A student generated questions based on observations that they make. That's another one. It's all based off of the kid's interest. And that authenticity, that active learning, I really like that, Sherry, that the kids can actually generate their own questions based on the observations that they make. That authentic piece is one, I think, the heart of the concept of inquiry. And when doing so, that can leave it up to a little open for us as educators. We can't plan the exact questions that kids are going to ask. So that's why we love this image. Keep calm and pretend this is on the lesson plan. Because it is. You just never know what the kids are going to ask, but that's a good thing. Because that would ultimately lead to a lot of project-based learning. If the kids are asking their own questions, they're going to want to find out the answers to those questions. And that genuinely leads to a project-based learning mentality, which inherently is going to need science practices. Many of you were talking about how you really want to or need to meet educational standards, whether it is through English language arts, whether it is state standards or science standards and meeting specific age groups. If you're talking about science standards in general, most states, if they haven't directly adopted the next generation science standards, many states such as New York State are informally adopting next generation science standards, making slight modifications, but inherently they're the same exact standards, and trying to address the same means of building science practices. And that process of science practices that kids are going to be developing through this definition of inquiry, so to say, where they're asking and answering their own questions, is not a linear process or a simple feedback loop. Depending on the questions they ask, they can go through so many different processes, to only looking up references and just finding the answer that way, to doing an experimental study where there is no hypothesis and simply collecting data. There's a lot of different ways that kids can go about the science process. This is a poster here that we've created for the investigating evidence curriculum that we'll talk about today. And I think it really shows that complexity of what an investigation can be. So we talked about this inquiry component. There is no strict definition we provide, but many of these concepts of having kids ask and answer their own questions and conducting their own investigations that build science practices. The other big part of today and next month for these webinars is talking about citizen science. So again, I'm going to open it up in the chat window. If you want to let us know what citizen science is to you, a definition or keywords. Okay, so responses are coming in: making observations, contributing to scientific research, data collection that's incidental, so it's part of a hobby or passion rather than a formal research project, Everyday people, regardless of educational background, contributing to a larger scientific study. I love that, Tina. That's a great definition. Laymen assisting in investigation and research and reporting from the field for scientific use. The opportunity to contribute to the scientific community. Individuals participating in scientific practices and contributing to scientific research. Ordinary people collecting information about a problem and working together to solve it. Science that you do in the classroom or out, but it's connected to lots of other people doing and sharing information about the same thing. Things the average person can do to discover the world around them. Opportunities for individuals and groups to participate in real hands-on science in conjunction with research and scientists. Yeah, you guys are citizen science experts here. Any one of these can be valid definitions of citizen science, which is at the heart of it what many of you guys have addressed. Projects in which volunteers, everyday people, laymen, or what I like to say, citizens of the world, that partner with scientists, researchers, their community to answer real world questions. The foundation of citizen science is not just making observations and recording those observations, but that those observations go to a scientific community or have a purpose to help the community to answer these questions. It has a significance. And that significance is incredibly motivating for the public. I believe it was Tina at the beginning of this webinar were looking for ways to help share to the public how that data is being used, the significance of that data. And that's something that we at Cornell have recognized that over the last decade, we haven't done the best of job with communicating how the data is being used. We frequently hear people asking, well, we know the data is going into this database in the cloud or wherever it is, but how is it actually being used? What is it helping with? One of the things we've done now to help address that is on Monday, we released a brand new course called eBird Essentials, which the first lesson is all about the importance of you all submitting data to eBird and an entire topic on how eBird is help making changes in our conservation and policy around the globe. So that's a motivational aspect of here's how your data is being used in these 5 practical reasons. And here's a list of 200 articles as well that have utilized eBird data for research or whatnot. So that is something where showing kids the fact that this data actually has significance, it has meaning, it is help making decisions in our world. That right there is a huge motivating factor, not just for adults, not just for kids, not just for birders and non-birders, it's for everybody. That really does help motivate them. Now, I mentioned that we have citizen science here at the lab, and I'll go over those in just a minute, but there are citizen science projects in every single field possible that I can think of. Not every single field, I guess, but many, many, many fields. And somebody else made a comment about this in the chat window, how they're looking for projects that their students are genuinely motivated in, and to find an interest in that. Not just force them to be interested in birds, say, but if they really like spiders, go with Operation Spider. If they want to monitor monarchs, or if they want to look at cloud cover, there's many different citizen science projects out there that can meet the interests of your kids. However, we are the Lab of Ornithology, and we are slightly biased, and birds are the best subjects to study. And each of these citizen science projects vary in what type of data is collected, how that data is collected, when that data is collected, where that data is collected. For example, all of our citizen science projects are observing birds except Habitat Network. Habitat Network is actually an online modeling tool that models habitat and the type of habitat is around you. You don't have to observe birds at all. In fact, you don't submit any bird observations to Habitat Network. Celebrate Urban Birds, you are observing birds, but you are only submitting 16 bird species, nothing else. And these are birds that are commonly found throughout North America. And in fact, they are creating Celebrate Urban Birds for many Central and South American countries too, with more, with different 16 bird species that are more prevalent in those specific countries. As well, Celebrate Urban Birds is the only completely bilingual program. So it's wonderful for giving you focal of just a certain number of species, but also if you have English language learners or have a Latina community in your area, you can use Celebrate Urban Birds for that English and Spanish version. However, eBird is our largest project, and that's probably the project that I strongly recommend for most people starting off with, especially for anybody who's in the informal educational setting where you're only with groups for short periods of time. eBird is one of the best ones to use because you can submit any bird anywhere at any point in time. All you have to do is just list how long you're out birding and where you're birding and the effort it took. And you can do it. Now, excuse me. We talk about citizen science and means to justifying it. And there's many different reasons to choose why citizen science, on top of the fact that it can lead to kids in actually making observations. The first and foremost is the fact that citizen science is really fun. It's providing opportunities for kids to get outside and study wild animals, whether those be birds or monarchs or spiders or earthworms, or even if they're not studying specific animals, but they're still getting outside and looking at clouds or water quality. It's still an opportunity for the kids to connect to nature. And in doing so, we as educators are teaching them STEM content and building skills. So following specific protocols, and depending on the citizen science project you choose, there can be some technology or engineering or mathematic components along with the science aspect of things. But you also are meeting educational standards. So this is the next generation science standards, snippets from it. For those who aren't familiar with the NGSS standards, I know people in Canada, you don't have to address this, but for those all in the US, you likely, if you have to meet any formal science standards, they're going to be similar to NGSS, and they're based on 3 components. The cross-cutting concepts, which these are concepts that apply to all content areas, whether life sciences, earth sciences, physical sciences, etc. The content or disciplinary core ideas in the orange. Most citizen science projects address life sciences. And then the final component is the scientific practices. And that's really the heart of where citizen science supports next generation science standards. And that is the fact that you are encouraging students to ask their own questions, plan and carry out their own investigations, analyze and interpret data, use computational thinking, evaluate and communicate information. Depending on the project you do, you can meet a variety of these practices. But that's not the only thing that citizen science can do if you strictly follow those protocols. It can also support kids making their own observations, which lead to separate investigations. We talked about how citizen science can be motivating. It can connect kids to the scientific community, and that spark the kids' curiosity. That's what I want to focus on for the rest of the webinars, how participating in citizen science can develop observations, and those observations can lead to questions that kids can investigate on their own. But of course, first and foremost, why choose citizen science? Because it's just fun. Here's a great quote from a 8th, 9th grade teacher, Phil, who says, I learned that taking kids outside and letting them do bird observation was a great way to motivate them to ask questions in science. And that is the heart of this webinar. Having kids do bird observations led them to ask questions in science. That's what we as educators want to accomplish. So that's where we've developed this curriculum called Investigating Evidence. It's a completely free download on our website, thanks to our sponsors, 3D Pet Products and Wild Delight. And it takes you as the educators through the process of having kids conduct their own investigations. We are bird nerds, but this curriculum is not bird focused. It's actually citizen science focused. So through the entire curriculum, each lesson has a citizen science call-out box with recommended projects that you can do with your students, whether it's insects, mammals, phenology, etc. There's a lot of different projects in here that we strongly recommend too. And what I want to talk about with this first webinar, second webinar, the whole My Investigation, where we're testing hypotheses, looking at data, that's all going to be in next month's webinar. This month's webinar, we want to focus on the observe and wonder and how kids can see themselves as scientists. And how kids see themselves as scientists, that right there is really groundbreaking, I think, as an educator. I'm wondering, feel free to put in the chat window if any of you have done this activity where you have kids draw a scientist. And it's very simple. I actually did this when I was a junior in college, where my social science professor, the first day, asked me to draw an image of a scientist. Now, I had never done this activity in high school or middle school, elementary school that I recall. So I started drawing what I thought a scientist looked like. And immediately I started to draw my friend Jay, who was a chemical engineer. And he very much looked like a crazy scientist that most kids would draw. He had the beard, the glasses, the crazy hair that went all over the place. And he was a chemical engineer, and I just envisioned him in some kind of sterile lab as he was working with chemicals. And to this day, I still remember Jay in that context explicitly. Now, we had one of our teachers, Jody Sikma, do this with her kids. And she's an elementary, I believe she did this activity with her bird club kids, which were kindergarten through 3rd grade. And she did this activity after she'd already started working with the kids in the bird club. And what she discovered was that she has inspired youth to enjoy science in the outdoors. And this is a message from her. I started with new groups this week, and my opening activity has always been to ask the kids to draw a scientist. And then we have the discussion about what a scientist is and does. I'm thrilled to report that so far this week, almost 98% of the girls drew a girl scientist. And a few kids of color drew a scientist of color too. About half the kids drew their scientist outside. The work we are all doing for kids is making a difference. Perceptions are changing. And this right here is exactly what we are trying to accomplish with, one, that lesson of what is a scientist, but two, as educators, for us to alter the perception of kids so that they can see themselves or people that look like them as a scientist, but also the fact that a scientist isn't just a crazy old white man exploding things in a sterile laboratory with chemicals. A scientist is somebody of color, is a woman, is somebody who can be outside, who can get dirty. And that's the perception that we are trying to convey. And I love this image because this is a young girl of color who's saying that she's a scientist, and there's a bird flying over her head. And that right there, she's like, that's gold. That's what we are trying to instill in our kids, that they themselves can be scientists. So right there, that's what we are trying to accomplish, or one of the things we're trying to accomplish with this Investigating Evidence curriculum. And Jody, who'd used that curriculum, clearly it's working for her kids. And the first lesson is all around developing observation and wonder. So having kids explore their environment and start to ask their own questions. They actually get to meet several different scientists as well in the process. But one of the key features that we introduced in this curriculum that I strongly recommend implementing in any kind of setting where you're going to be working with kids is an I Wonder board. It's pictured here in the right, and it can be a post-it page like this. It can be a page in a children's science notebook or nature journal. Nature journals are amazing. I strongly recommend them. But it's a location where kids can share their questions. Now, some of these questions can start off at the basic of how far does a bird migrate, or how long can a whale hold its breath? But other of these questions can lead to future investigations. And so this is a great opportunity to store those questions for them. So what I want to do here is take a quick moment and let you guys see or think about, I would like you guys to share any activities that you do in the chat window about how to inspire observations in your kids. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Okay, what I'd like you to do in the chat window is let us know if you have any activities that are go-to that help inspire observations in kids. And I'm looking in the chat window now. Heather just made a comment that she does the Draw Sciences activity with her students in college. Oh, that you did this activity as a student in college, but you also do it with your own students at the beginning of the year. Yes, excellent. So again, in the chat window, if you guys have a go-to activity that is great for inspiring kids' observations, let us know in the chat window. This is a great opportunity to share any of your wonderful activities that you love. And will give me a moment to catch my breath. So the very first thing that we'll want to do with kids before we start with having them just ask questions right away is to do some slow introductory activities to help them foster observations. And that could be as simple as going outside. Judith, I see that you put out, you have the kids monitor a creek near their school. Erin talks about having the kids sitting in camping chairs in the trees and observing the birds, and adding tools like binoculars make it a lot more fun. Tina, the paint swatch activity, I'd love to know what that is. I'm not familiar with that one. Catherine says she started using the I Wonder board last year, and the kids love it, and it's amazing the kinds of questions they come up with. You also let them walk the room at the start of the year to check out the science stuff and ask any questions they have. That's great. Leah's talking about how you give the kids binoculars and ask them, what do you notice in nature, or what observations can you make? Yeah, so giving kids the opportunity for free exploration, such as going through a creek, or giving them tools such as binoculars. Heather's saying she does an inquiry activity that is called ice balls. So you fill a balloon with water and let it turn to ice, and then add water slowly in some, fast in others, letting people investigate the balls. They can then make them melt faster, slower, asking questions about the bubble patterns. How does it melt? Oh, that's cool. So Anne's talking about so much depends on what they're observing. using a lot of thinking routines. The I Wonder board is also a favorite for you. Sherry's saying she's taking students outside and asking them to sketch something. Ooh, that's wonderful. Bringing in the arts and having something that they usually observe encourages them to look closely and carefully. Sarah Smith talks about science props. Yes, for those who aren't familiar with Sarah, she does some amazing job with with theater and science and using either puppets or acting to help talk about that. But you're also talking about skulls and other hands-on activities. A tactile experience is a great starting point. Raising ladybugs or monarchs, trail cameras. Okay, so the paint swatch activity, Tina, thank you. Each child picks a paint swatch and they need to find something that matches that color. It's amazing the most crazy colors can be found in nature and that they can learn more about what they find. The inside of a crab carapace, ooh, that's really cool. I like that. Actually, Kelly, that reminds me of your bird color picture challenge or whatever. Kelly's writing friends would give her a random color and she had to find a bird that had the same color plumage or body part at some point. Awesome. These are really cool ideas and activities. Many of them seem to definitely be a great opportunity, as could be simple, short activities you can do with the public, or they can be great introductory activities for your class. But what's wonderful is they all kind of vary in many different tools and strategies. And Anne, would you mind sharing with us what model magic is? Just to replicate the color afterwards. But ultimately it comes down to, you know, giving kids the opportunity just to explore on their own. The concept of free exploration, so to say, giving them tools, and the tool concept of putting binoculars in the hands, or something tactile approach that Cheryl was mentioning. That'd be great. Sherry, you're talking about silent listening and drawing a map of what you hear. Yeah, we call that a sound map activity. It's really fun, just to let kids draw what they hear just by what they sound. This is exciting, yeah. So there's a lot of different activities that many have, and those are great starting points to just first develop observations, but as many of you are familiar with, those observations lead to questions naturally, and the I Wonder board is a great tool to record those questions. I know for me, anytime I go outside and just start doing simple observations, I'm always surprised by the crazy things I start to see when I do go outside. More recently, I know that turkeys fly, but seeing a turkey fly, Kelly and I, we have a family of turkeys that have taken residency in our neighborhood and frequently visit our yard every morning. And occasionally my dog goes out, he scares the turkeys, and for the most part they are totally fine, but one day they were in the fenced dog yard and they decided that instead of crawling through the fence like they normally do, they had to fly away. And watching a turkey fly makes me ask questions like, well, how heavy is the turkey actually? And who is their nearest relative? And immediately starts making me ask questions about it. Looking at a simple image like this can be something that can be seen anywhere in the world. Yet we can have kids look at this and questions can naturally start arising. And us as educators, we need to approach this as, if we want to prompt questions with kids, we need to make sure that we are not immediately giving the answer right away, such as, look at that pigeon drinking. We need to start opening up the questions or statements that we're saying to encourage more questions with kids, such as, what species is that? Or what clues could be used to identify the species? We can open it even more of what is that bird doing, or why do you think the bird is doing that? But then we can really take approaches to lead these questions or ideas, these observations that we make, into more investigative questions like, how do birds survive in cities? Or will all birds drink from fountains? The will all birds drink from fountains can simply be an observation study where you have kids sit out in front of a fountain over the course of a week or two and look at the different bird species that are visiting the fountain. Are certain species visiting and drinking while others are not? Or another great investigative question, will putting out a bird bath attract more birds? That's a great experimental study that you can do. So taking the observations that kids make, we as educators can either shut off this investigative spirit or encourage this investigative spirit. Asking those questions of, will all birds drink from fountains, or will putting out a bird bath attract birds? That can naturally lead to investigations that kids go, oh, I don't know, let's try and figure out the answer. So again, these go through concepts like observational studies versus experimental studies. Many kids will start off with the concept of reference questions, meaning these are questions like, my turkey question, how heavy does a turkey weigh? Where kids can just find or reference a material that online or in a book to find the answer to. But ultimately, we want to work them up to those observational or experimental studies like, will putting out a bird bath attract more birds? This past year, we actually led or conducted a national challenge for kids focusing on the kids studying feeder bird behavior. Now, Kelly's working on the process right now of getting all the submissions reviewed and seeing which ones we publish, but there are two that really caught my eye. This was done by a really young boy. He was still probably in only kindergarten, first, second grade maybe, and he was very interested in whether or not would pictures of a calm cat versus a scary cat scare off more birds. Now, I'm not sure I would consider grumpy cat necessarily a calm cat image, but these are the actual photos that he used for his experiment, and wanted to see if these photos of a calm versus a scary cat would impact birds or not. Now, he did find with this experimental study and these different variables that more birds visited when there were no cat pictures around compared to either the calm or the scary cats. But still, he's going through the science process of having variables and collecting data through a protocol and analyzing that information. And for an elementary boy, this is exactly the interest that he has. He was curious about this, and he had fun with it, clearly, with finding cat photos. Two sixth grade girls had actually done a experimental study around blue jays. Now, these girls started off the process by actually participating in citizen science. Before, they were observing birds, and they had observed while participating in citizen science that blue jays were around the feeder. When they were around the feeder, smaller birds flew away. They were scared of the blue jays, they thought. So the girls wanted to ask, would a decoy blue jay have the same effect? So after a month-long feeder observations, they actually concluded that the visiting birds preferred a feeder without the decoy. Again, these girls first participated in citizen science, noticed this observation that when blue jays were at the feeder, other birds flew away, and they wanted to test that if that would be the same with a decoy blue jay, and go through the entire scientific process again. So ultimately, this leads us to the concept of what types of questions do you think your students will be interested in? For the sake of time, I just want to quickly go over a couple things before I give you guys a sneak peek of our website. First and foremost, I mentioned at the beginning, eBird is probably the most accessible citizen science project that the Cornell Lab offers. For background, it is any bird, anywhere, at any point in time. And to support new eBird users, we've developed this whole new course. It's short, but it's very comprehensive in the basic strategies of why to participate in eBird, with the motivational things and how the data is used, what information you can get out of eBird, such as finding local birds near you or locations to go birding, and then how to contribute to eBird, the basic protocols and steps. And there are some amazing videos in there that supplement the course. On top of it, Kelly's developed the eBird Essentials for Educators handout too, that complement you as educators to take this public course and then transfer that information of how you can use it with kids in the classroom. So I'm sure Kelly just shared the link in the chat window, and I highly recommend you guys check out that new course. Quick bit of administrative stuff real quick. We are now offering continuing education units for anybody who's completing webinars. If you're interested in CEUs, give us an email or just go to the website and you can purchase CEUs there. If you do not need formal continuing education units, if you're not sure you need them, then you probably don't. We are offering free completion letters still, so just send us an email, BirdSleuth@cornell.edu, and you can get your completion letter. Kelly and I will take any questions. This is our contact information. I will put this up again in a moment, but first I want to show you guys a sneak peek at our new website. Woo, we're very excited about this. The reason why we asked you the prompt question at the beginning was we have this tab, Citizen Science and Inquiry, with these drop-down menus here. If you have any thoughts as to what information or titles you would like in this drop-down menu, we want to address similar topics like we did today. How to encourage you as educators to participate in citizen science, as well as the resources that are available and success stories, like stories from the field that are available. So if you do have any thoughts about the content that should be in this drop-down menu, or what the titles are for this drop-down menu should be, so that it's more accessible for users, do let us know in the chat window or via email. Again, this is our contact information here. Feel free to get social with Kelly or Jackie on social media, Twitter, Facebook. You can check out our website, birdsleuth.org, or give us an email, birdsleuth@cornell.edu. Whew. We'll take any questions you guys have now. I'm just seeing the comments on turkeys. Yeah, they're clumsy, but they are charming. Yeah, Heather, I did see that about decoy puffins. Actually, Stephen Kress, he is one of the leading puffin researchers here, and he's housed at the Cornell Lab when he's not over in Maine. And he was one of the people that started off with putting decoy puffins out. But I love the whole one leg, one stick decoys. I think it's really hilarious.